Her hands were shaking. She turned the letter over and over. The wax seal reflected the light. She opened it and saw the words. She screamed and ran out of the palace. Spanning 820 years of history, the hall dates back to the 1500s. It represents one of the very few examples of early domestic apartments in the northwest and the UK, and as such is therefore nationally significant, being Grade 1 listed. And this was the family seat of the Radcliffe family, who resided in the hall for over 300 years. When I worked as an archaeologist, I worked for the University of Salford's archaeology department, and we had our meetings at the hall. The oldest parts of Ordsall Hall that we see today were built in the 15th century. However, a previous structure predated this. A dwelling has been on the site for more than 800 years. The earliest structure was in the records dating back to 1177. They paid 2 marks towards aid, a feudal due. The original hall was built and owned by David de Hulton in 1251. The hall came into the ownership of the Radcliffe family in 1335, when David de Hulton died without having any children. But Sir John did not do anything with his inheritance until 1354. His inheritance was the manor, 120 acres of land, 12 acres of wood, and 12 acres of meadow. The main reason the inheritance wasn't touched for these years is during the 1340s, Sir John Radcliffe was campaigning in France with Edward III, and on his return he was well rewarded for his service, and the king also allowed him to take some Flemish weavers back to his estate, where he built cottages for his new workforce. The current hall was built in 1512 by Sir Alexander Radcliffe, who was the High Sheriff of Lancashire. The hall remained in the Radcliffe family up until the English Civil War, when everybody was forced to pick sides, and the Radcliffe family, unfortunately, backed the royal cause, who lost to Oliver Cromwell and his parliamentarians. With Sir Alexander supporting the royalists, he was imprisoned, leaving his son and heir, John, in charge of running the estate. And heavy fines and a large financial impact were forced him to sell the manor to Colonel John Birch in 1662. Ordsall Hall draws in many visitors, but the building is very popular with the paranormal community, with the most famous ghost being that of the White Lady. She is being reported to walk around the halls, the stairs and the Star Chamber, holding a candle. The White Lady's true identity remains a mystery, although there have been many suggestions of who she could be. Some believe that she could be the ghost of Viviana Radcliffe. It is believed that the infamous Guy Fawkes visited Ordsall Hall, and during his stay he fell in love with Viviana while he was plotting the Gunpowder Plot. It's a nice story, but there are 2 problems here. The Gunpowder Plot was hatched at the gatehouse of Ashby Manor in Northamptonshire, and secondly, Guy Fawkes never came to Ordsall Hall. It was made up by William Harrison Ainsworth in 1841. The most accurate account I can find of who the White Lady might be and what happened is this. Margaret was the daughter of Sir John Radcliffe of Ordsall and Anne Ashar, a strong-willed but sensitive girl who had a very close bond with her twin brother Alexander, and growing up together their bond grew. And when they became of age, Margaret and Alexander both went to court, with Margaret becoming a favourite, a lady-in-waiting and a maid of honour to Queen Elizabeth I. And letters of the time inform us that Margaret often wore white satin gowns, all embroidered and richly cut on good cloth of silver, which cost about £180, which in today's money is a hefty price tag. In the 1590s, Margaret started courting the Lord's son, Henry Brooke, and her brother Sir Alexander, knighted for his success fighting the Spanish, sailed to Ireland to fight in the 9 Years' War. The 9 Years' War, sometimes called the Tyrone's Rebellion, which raged from the 1593 to the 1603. and was fought between an Irish Confederation led mainly by Hugh O'Neill of Tyrone and Hugh Roe O'Donnell of Tyrconnell against the ongoing Tudor conquest and rule of Ireland. While courting Henry Brooke, Margaret discovered her man was also courting Frances Howard, Countess of Kildare, and Elizabeth Russell, another maid of honour to Elizabeth. Margaret found out about this after Frances Howard told her and mocked her over her man's betrayal. She was heartbroken and took to her rooms. She wrote to her mother, but Margaret knew the only person she could turn to was Alexander. She wrote to him, but received no reply, until one day Margaret received a creased letter held together by a wax seal. She was overjoyed, her heart raced. She briefly forgot about Henry, thinking this letter was from her brother Alexander. But she froze when she saw the seal wasn't one she recognised. She lowered the letter. She couldn't open it. She felt it'd be more bad news. She had a broken heart and just wanted her brother to come back. Her best friend, her twin. But still, she had to know what the letter contained, and walking over to the light of the window, she opened the letter. In flowing, scrawling letters, it told Margaret how on the 5th of August 1599, the English were ambushed and then routed by Hugh Roe O'Donnell in the Battle of Curlew Pass, and her beloved brother, Sir Alexander Radcliffe, was among the English killed due to the battle that day. After being horribly wounded, he was taken by fever a few hours later. Alexander was 26 years old when he died. This was too much for Margaret. She dropped the letter and ran. She left Richmond Palace, where the Queen was staying, and fled back home to Ordsall Hall. She locked herself away in her chambers for 4 days. Worried for her health, Queen Elizabeth kept summoning her to Richmond Palace, where she could be looked after, but sadly, to this Margaret consistently declined. She stopped eating and drinking, and due to her depression, and the pressure of the attack from her friend, the betrayal of the 11th Baron Cobham, Henry Brooke, and the death of her beloved brother, all at once proved too much, and on the 10th of November 1599, Margaret Radcliffe died of starvation. Upon hearing the news, Frances Howard, Lady Kildare, hoped that Lord Cobham would proceed to marry her now that Margaret was out the way. Queen Elizabeth, however, didn't take the news well, and made all her maids dress in black. Queen Elizabeth also paid for Margaret's funeral, and it was an occasion of some note, as she was given a funeral deemed fitting for a daughter of a nobleman. All the 24 women attending the ceremony were bestowed with new gowns to wear. Ben Jonson, a famous playwright, was commissioned to write an ode to her that read, quote, "Rare as wonder was her wit, and like nectar ever flowing, earth thou hast not such another." It was unheard of for the Queen to do this for a maid, but furthermore, according to Philip Gaudy, a Norfolk lawyer of the time with court connections, states that the Queen ordered an autopsy, which was not common practice at the time, in which said she was perfectly okay, apart from she suffered from snapped heartstrings, which meant she died of a broken heart. And as a result of all this grief, the spectral figure in white is believed to be that of the ghost of Margaret Radcliffe, who is said to be roaming the hall, holding a candle, forever in search of her lost twin. Sometimes the candle is seen floating on its own, and this is often seen in the Star Chamber at Ordsall. Sir John Radcliffe is another former resident who haunts the hall, and former Lord Mayor of the manor, who was a famed soldier and died during the siege of Saint Martin de Riehl in France, when the English fought the French wars of religion. His ghost is known to be rather fond of the ladies, having made some pretty bold advances in the past. Again, in the Star Chamber, women often report the feeling of unseen hands touching and pushing them and gently caressing their faces. Also in the Star Chamber, voices of small children are often heard, talking and laughing. And the final ghost I'll mention is the ghost of young Cecily, a girl said to haunt Ordsall, particularly when children or school parties visit. The young woman was jilted, abandoned on the morning of her wedding day, and unable to cope with the heartbreak, Cecily is thought to have thrown herself from the top of the main staircase, breaking her neck, leading to her death. It is said that you can tell when she is near, because the air is filled with the sweet smell of roses. I hope you liked this week's video, giving you some insight behind the ghosts that roam Ordsall Hall. Let me know in the comments below if you've ever been there and if you felt anything strange happen to you. And if you're new here, don't forget to like and subscribe. That'll do. Until next time, take care.